SMW, it's Melissa
and Stephanie Carcache,
two sisters and the founders of Millennial Women and your host of Millennial Women Talk, the Mini Talks. We're so excited to introduce to you our next MW, Kati Schmidt. Kati moved to San Francisco from Germany in 2012 and started her career at Airbnb. She was part of the Airbnb Experiences team and quickly learned a big challenge in her community. Millennials were having trouble dating.
They wanted to date with intention and respect, so Kati decided to create PinaColada. She's taking out the frustration out of our dating experiences and allowing us to form real connections in a group relaxed setting over some amazing food in the incredible restaurants all throughout San Francisco. Kati, welcome. We are so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be with you.
What exactly is PinaColada? Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired it?
Absolutely. So PinaColada is like the new way of slow dating. I just realized that the dating experience, the online dating experience is broken, and that many of my friends, let's say in their late 30s, had quite a frustrating dating experience. I would say especially women. So I was just thinking, how can we kind of bring back real life experiences, kind of how dating used to be, and kind of slow it down a little bit. And then I'm a super foodie, and I thought, okay, food also has the power to connect people. So I thought just to create an experience that is a little bit more casual, it's less awkward, I started organizing group dinner dates in great restaurants in San Francisco.
What has been the biggest challenge that you have seen in San Francisco in our generation? What is like the biggest issue that's impacting the women, the millennial women of San Francisco, when it comes to their dating life?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. So San Francisco, where I live, everybody has an app for everything. So kind of walking up to someone on the street or in a bar and saying hi has become a little bit creepy. I think for men, it's a little bit hard, or it's a lame excuse in the era of Me Too that they don't know how aggressive they can be or like how to approach a woman. And then for women as well, I think the women that are here, they're also super busy. Many of them work in tech. So a lot of them also prioritize work. And then it's just like, if you're not used to that anymore, then how do you date? And then you look at apps, there's, I think, 1,500 dating apps and services across the country. So where do you start, right? How do you even approach dating? I think that's where a lot of people already get overwhelmed.
Wow. Yeah. I think it's very interesting as well that you are from Germany. In your perspective and in your experience, what are the differences between dating in Germany versus here in America? I
think it depends a little bit, not even, I wouldn't say the entire country of Germany or even the entire US. So I think I lived in Berlin for 2 years, and there the nightlife is super big, right? So most people actually meet while they're out with their friends, while they're clubbing. I'm not sure you make the best choices when you're maybe drunk or you're in a club or it's 2 a.m. at night or something. But that's kind of how it happens in Berlin. San Francisco is pretty much the opposite. Like, people work all day, they kind of go to bed at 9 p.m., right? And then how do you fit in dating? So it has to be a little bit more around daytime activities. A lot of people say, oh, I can only date on weekends. So it's very different, but I'm sure across the US or across Germany, it's already very different.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about our generation, and I hear this all the time, they're on Tinder, they're on Bumble, they're like on all the dating apps. Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking to myself the other day, and I'm like, why? Are we not leaving it up to quote unquote destiny? Or like, what if I go to Starbucks and I bump into the love of my life? Like, why are millennials using apps? Why do you think that's happening?
Yeah, I think a little bit, and that's a little bit true probably also for California. Like, we here are a little bit more passive aggressive. So we're not very direct. And an app is kind of safe because even if you are at Starbucks, you can pull up an app with location-based targeting, and you can kind of check if the person that you can see, like just standing there, might be single, might be using the same app. I think a lot of people are afraid of rejection, like walking up to someone might be awkward. So apps make it easier. And also apps, it's kind of, I think research shows that dating is a numbers game. So the app kind of gives you a lot of choices at your fingertips, but often too many choices that it's overwhelming and more paralyzing.
Yeah, and even talking about these dating apps, some dating apps in specific kind of get this hookup culture kind of stigma into them. How do you maintain PinaColada to be an intentional dating service?
Yeah, I think the whole way that PinaColada is set up, it's kind of too complicated for hookups. The way it works is that people sign up through a website, through a form, and then they can only join when they're invited. And they don't see a profile, so they can swipe. They don't have to check in all the time, but hopefully one day soon they get an invite to dinner, and then they have 24 hours to book it. And they also pay up front. They only pay for their own dinner. I've heard from some men, it's nice that they're like, oh, it's quite a lot of money, but on the other hand, I'm paying for myself, and the women, they also pay for their own share. And then also it's quite a big time commitment. So it's a multiple course dinner, typically takes around 3 hours at least. So I think for a hookup, you kind of want something cheaper, something quicker. You want the ability, maybe a little bit more superficial. You want to see a profile or photo. I think PinaColada is pretty much the opposite from that.
Yeah, I love how you've already thought about that prior. Like you already know what options are out there that people are looking for. So you're like, no, we're gonna make this a 3-hour dinner, and it's gonna be a nice dinner to avoid any of these hiccups. But I think it's so cool. I think you pick, if I'm not mistaken, it's 3 men and 3 women, correct?
Yeah, I've hosted 2 LGBTQ dinners where obviously I had women only or men only. But for straight dinners, it's 3 and 3. Yeah.
So 3 and 3. So it's 6 in total people that go to the dinners. And what happens after? So like, let's say one, maybe there's a couple that clicked and they made that connection. Do you follow up later and say, hey, like, I mean, I don't know what kind of, it's such like an awkward role, right? It's like you're there, you're making magic happen pretty much. And then now what happens? Do you follow up with them? How do you kind of know what happens to your lovely attendees?
Yeah. So one of the rules is that they're not supposed to exchange contact information right at the dinner. Also for the same reason. I think it might be hard for someone to say no if they don't want that. It might also be very embarrassing if there's a rejection in front of everybody else. So I think a lot of folks just prefer they go home and the next day they can tell me who they want to be connected with. And sometimes that's just everybody on like a friend basis via group email, or it's like one woman or maybe all 3 women, they take their chances. And then only if both sides say yes, then I make the connection. And otherwise, I'm also the bad cop. So I'm actually closing the loop. So I wait a week for people to like respond to me. And then I tell them, okay, unfortunately this time the other person wasn't interested in connecting, or we haven't heard back, but we would love to have you again for dinner. And a lot of folks actually appreciate, so they don't have to wonder, like if they felt a click or the magic happen, but then they don't hear back. Like sometimes people make up excuses in their mind, but if I tell them actually the other person wasn't interested in a really nice way, they actually appreciate that.
I love that.
Your job is so interesting. You are like the millennial matchmaker. I love it. Can you tell us, I'm very curious, tell us a little bit about your process and how you pair the groups. What are some of your matchmaking skills?
Yeah, absolutely. So like many other dating apps, I have a survey that is based on the big 5 personality traits. And those are those ranges that look at compatibility with another person. So one of the ranges that most people are familiar with is like being an introvert or an extrovert, right? And I'm not looking for identical twins, but usually for long-term success, research shows that the closer you are, the less tension there is. So if you have a little bit of a tension or spread in one of those ranges, I think it's fine. But if you're on the opposite extremes in each of those ranges, there's probably a lot of potential for conflict, or you're not on the same wavelength. So I've targeted my questions around those 5 traits, actually not looking for like love at first sight, but actually already baking into the long-term capability into the process.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I love about what you do too is that it is set on intention and respect, which is why at the end you sort of say, okay, you made the connection or didn't make the connection. So everybody's really there for the right reasons. But what are like, I don't know if you may or may not know the answer to this, but are there any red flags? Like, and especially like us, you know, women that are dating or anything like that, like what are the red flags to look out for? And have you seen that happen in some of your events?
I think if I don't have a good gut feeling when I go through the survey answers, I'm not really willing to place people. So I have to feel good about it. So I'm really trusting my guts. I think there's not too much risk involved. The good thing is the date happens at a public place. It's a restaurant. I tell people to get there safely with an Uber or a Lyft. They're not exchanging contact info, or they're not supposed to exchange contact information. They can do that through me afterwards. So I'm also like, I'm giving a few safety tips and like telling them like, look, I'm not doing criminal background checks. Therefore my operation is too small. So please use your common sense and be safe. But when I look at the survey answers, I'm like, this is really fishy. And sometimes people are very blunt. Like I had people like, hey, you should do a dating service for people that are already in relationships. And I was like, maybe in the future, but I think right now, PinaColada is not for you. So I think if some people are seeking this specifically, they're already asking about that.
Right. So right from the get-go, you already know yay or nay. I love that though, because it really it really makes your message extremely awesome and valuable, because now we know as the consumer that it's a trustworthy, you know, place to make connections. I love that.
Yeah. Going into your dinners, as we all know, sometimes it's a little bit nerve-wracking, a little bit of those first date jitters.
The awkwardness, right?
Totally. What are some of the icebreakers that you kind of instill in your dinners just to get those jitters controlled?
Absolutely. So I think there's 2 things. One is like the closer the date is coming, I start kind of revealing a little bit more about the group. I tell them about the first names of the people that they're meeting. I tell them about what they have in common and why they're being matched. I tell them about like other topics that people could nominate that they were interested in discussing. Doesn't mean that they actually, when they're there, they talk about it, but it's more like, hey, like the people in your group, they want to talk about travel or politics, or didn't want to talk about politics. So they get a little bit of a feeling. And then even on the day off, I send like short text messages, just like, hey, reminder, be on time. And then when they get there, there's printed conversation starters, which I picked from the New York Times published an article called The 36 Questions That Lead to Love. And out of the 36, I picked like some that are kind of easy, optimistic, and that kind of get the conversation going. So if they want to, they can start with those. But a lot of groups, they just hit it off from the beginning and they're not even using those.
Now we talked about the negative side, about red flags and all that good stuff, but let's talk about the positive. Success stories. Has anybody gotten married? Please tell me yes. Like, I would love to know this.
I hope so. I'm still waiting for the invitation to my first wedding. So usually the success rate is around 30%, which means that after each date, like 30% of the people or of the connections are mutual. And then there are additional ones that are where one person isn't interested. And that doesn't even take into account all the platonic relationships as well. Because sometimes people just like, they meet someone they want to, I don't know, do sports with, or a future roommate or colleague or something like that. So I think that's pretty good. And then out of the people that don't get a match, actually I have a lot of people that come like repeatedly and do multiple PinaColada dinners because they just like it and they're hopeful that the next time it will work for them.
Kati, we know that PinaColada is in San Francisco, but what is your goal for the future of PinaColada? And please say that it's coming to Miami and everywhere else.
I would actually love to expand. And Miami, I'm sure, is a great fit. You have amazing food out there and a lot of people, so that's great. I would personally rather work with entrepreneurs on the ground than expanding myself. Just from being at Airbnb for such a long time, I've seen the company grow so much, and it isn't always fun. So I would rather think of something like a partnership model where if there's someone in Miami or Berlin or Tokyo who's super passionate about doing their version of Pina Colada, then I'm happy to work with them and share my resources with them and figure it out.
I think what you're doing is really amazing, and thank you for sharing this time with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
If you want to learn more about Kati and Pina Colada, please visit her at pinacolada-sf.com, and don't forget to follow her on Instagram.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Mini Talks, airing every Thursday on our YouTube channel, Facebook, IGTV, as well as wearemillennialwomen.com. While you're there, don't forget to leave us a comment.
Until next time, MW,
Always love,
Melissa,
and Stephanie Carcache.